So, welcome everybody to my podcast. This is the second episode of it. I started last month with an interview with sales engineer from Cisco, and today I'm going to invite a product manager. His name is Shane Tuohy. He's one of my colleagues. We kind of work together in an extended team in collaboration business unit. So I'm gonna hand it over to Shane. And Shane, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your background, your education. What do you do from hobby perspective, so that we can learn about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So my name is Shane Tuohy. I'm based in the west coast of Ireland, a place called Galway. It's quite sunny today, but it usually rains about 250 days a year. I've been a product manager at Cisco for the last 3 years. I've been at Cisco for 5 years in total. My kind of background is a little bit slightly different to most kind of product managers, I guess. I started off in university and did an electronic and computer engineering degree in the National University of Ireland, Galway. When I graduated from that, I went straight on, did a PhD in automotive networking, where I did simulations of next generation self-driving car networks and things like that. And once I finished that off, I started working at Cisco, and I started off as a software engineer, and I worked on different types of cloud calling products as a software engineer for a few years. And then I transitioned about 3 years ago into product management. So I saw an opportunity to change my role and something I was interested in. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And at the moment, I'm leading our platform for WebEx calling in Cisco. When I'm not working, I'm really big into sport. So there's lots and lots of different sports.
I guess.
Yeah, rugby's a big one in Ireland. Most popular sports in Ireland are actually not rugby. They're Gaelic football and hurling, which are actually our most popular sports that are only played in Ireland, apart from small pockets in other countries. But yeah, one of my big sports would be rugby. I don't play rugby, but I referee, and I play some non-contact forms of rugby. I'd rather not have my nose broken repeatedly, so I just referee instead of actually playing. But yeah, so most of the time when COVID isn't happening, I'd be spending most evenings out playing sports in various different forms. So they're kind of my hobbies. I do a lot of home automation as well. So home automation projects are what's keeping me occupied over the last year or so, to try and while we're all stuck inside because of COVID.
Yeah, that's nice. So like, do you have like a fully Meraki network deployed with automated camera sensing?
Yeah, so we're actually moving house soon, and I'm planning out my network at the moment and where I'm doing my Cat6 cable runs and where my wireless access points are going to be. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun planning that out at the moment.
Awesome. I think I shared with you previously that, I lived in the northern part of the Ireland for 6 years in Belfast. So this is where I actually joined Broadsoft. So Broadsoft has an office up in the Belfast, and I was in the professional services team, so I was driving, up and down from Belfast to Dublin when I was working with Vodafone Ireland at the time. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with, the Irish culture and the weather and the sports. So nothing's gonna surprise me.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. So let's further go into our discussion. So you said you started your career as an electronics engineer, and then you became a software developer. And then once you finished your PhD, then you went into the product management role. So how was your transition from an engineer to become a product manager?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's an interesting role because no one goes, I don't know of any, but no one really goes to university and does a course in product management. There's, some people do business courses, some people do management courses, some people do just, technical courses, but they all end up becoming product managers. So you get a lot of different backgrounds in product management. You get some people who are really hot on the kind of business analysis and things like that. And then you've got quite some very technical product managers as well. So transition was it was interesting. You don't program anymore, which was a big departure. But one of the more interesting things was just really trying to figure out what a product manager does. So I talked with a few product managers before I made the transition to try and understand what my day-to-day role would be like. And the main kind of takeaway that I got from all those conversations that I had was that no two product managers no 2 days are the same as a product manager, and no two product managers ever have the same days. So different product managers operate in very different ways, and it's kind of up to you to figure out what kind of area that you're going to focus on. So some of the product managers on our team would focus very much on like the business aspects. So they would sort of be very deep in, well, what licenses are we going to sell? What offers are we going to provide? What countries are we going to launch in first? You can't launch in every country all at the same time. There's various different things you have to put in place to launch in different countries. And so figuring out that strategy and working out what the best way to approach that is, that's some product managers do that kind of stuff. That's not really my focus. Other product managers then would be a lot more technical and really, focusing deep into, the real nuts and bolts, like which piece of the code will we implement first, which piece of the code will we do next, and kind of planning out that strategy and getting the requirements for that. Then you've got all other kinds of product managers that are somewhere in between the two, where they do, both of those kind of things, where they do some business stuff, they do some technical direction and strategy and stuff like that. So it's quite difficult to define what a product manager, is and what your day is going to look like. But generally speaking, the main thing that everybody has in common is that a product manager is, it's quite analogous and similar to what a product owner would be in Agile. You own the product. You are the person who's setting the direction for the product. You don't work directly on the code for the product, so the bugs and things that go wrong with the product aren't necessarily directly your fault, but they kind of are your fault in a way, and they are, your responsibility to go and get fixed. So, ownership and management of the actual product itself, or the area of the product, there's not just one product manager for big products like anything that's out there. Uber just doesn't have one product manager that owns Uber. They'll have a product manager for each of the different various small pieces of the product, and they're accountable to senior leadership to make sure that they deliver new features and to make sure that they deliver on time and to make sure that they don't have any major downtime. And so that's kind of how I see a product manager. We often get confused with program managers or project managers. And to kind of just give a little bit of an overview of what the difference there is, because I think that's important and a lot of people miss it, is a project manager takes a particular deliverable, like maybe it's a new feature, you're creating a new type of widget and you want to, develop that. A project manager will help, manage the project and make sure it gets delivered on time, make sure it gets delivered on budget, make sure that the developers have everything they need to execute, get people unblocked by helping out with various bits and pieces across the project. But the product manager is the actual owner of the direction. The product manager decided which type of widget we were going to build in the first place, and then the project manager takes those requirements and then makes sure that they're delivered on time. So just important to understand the subtlety there.
Yeah, this is very important. I think a lot of people get confused on that when it comes to understanding product manager role versus product manager and product manager. I think there is also a variation of it under product management. We call it product management or product manager marketing or product marketing manager. And it's a slightly different role, right? So that person is, in my understanding, faces the field more than a product manager who's working on the product with the engineering team, right? So can you talk about a little bit on this, how you differentiate between a product manager versus a product marketing manager?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of really, that kind of difference is a little bit, it's not really all that massively important. Different companies will have different things. A lot of companies won't have a project marketing manager. They'll just call them product marketing manager. They'll just call them product managers, and there'll just be one type. And then other companies will separate the two. They'll have product marketing managers, and they'll have technical product managers. And some companies make no differentiation at all. So that's kind of what I talked about previously. A lot of all product managers, really. I don't know of any product managers that I've ever come across that don't talk to the field directly and don't talk to the sales guys, don't talk to customers directly and deal with escalations from customers. Pretty much every product manager does that, and that's an element of every product manager's role. But you're right, though. Those, if your label is a product marketing manager, and that's more kind of the things that you're interested in, you would be dealing a little bit more with customers. So yeah, I deal with, I talk to our customers and our partners, I'd say easily once or twice a week, but those people might be doing it every single day. Is the difference there.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So can you also maybe at a high level talk about when a product manager starts a product, like what's the high level kind of a roadmap or journey, like, from like requirements gathering, doing market analysis, understanding, the market value of the product, and then kind of piece it together and then create an MVP, and then all the way to the overall roadmap and go to market. Can you kind of very high level, share with us,
I'll try and do it at a very high level, because if we get into too much detail on that, we could be talking for hours. That's the core of the job. It's it's identifying what to do. Oftentimes you'll be given an existing product and you have to improve it, or you have to decommission it. That happened early in my role as a product manager. I had to decommission an existing product, and that's got its own set of challenges. But you'll have a product, or maybe you have no product at all, and you just have a strategic direction that the company wants to go in, and you have to come up with a way that we can achieve that. So it really kind of starts from, you have your strategic, we're a large company here, you have your strategic direction from leadership that comes down that we want to attack the market in this particular way. Here's how we're going to differentiate the product. Here's where we're strong and where we're weak, and here's where we want to improve. And so, you look at those goals that the company has for the year overall. And look at the technology that you have and the software that you have currently, and how can you achieve those goals with the technology that you have, or how can you enhance the technology, or how can you create new elements of the product that will help you to achieve those goals. So one mistake that product managers sometimes make is that they go and talk to the customer, and the customer says, I want X, and the product manager goes, okay, I'll deliver X, and then job done, let's go home. That's not really what product management is. There's obviously always a certain amount of listening to the customer and listening to the partners and the sales team and all the rest of it. But a product manager just listens to the customer and does what they want will find themselves in trouble very, very quickly. And the reason is that the customer knows best, but the customer doesn't always know exactly what you want. It doesn't always have the best interest of your customer. That becomes a custom product. And if you are a contracting firm that literally makes custom products for customers, then perfect. That's exactly what you have to do.
Yeah.
But if you want to create a product that's going to appeal to all of your customers rather than just those select few, then you have to kind of take ownership of that and sometimes say no to what the customer wants. So once you've decided on a strategic direction, or once you've decided on what goal that you want to hit, you want to get double your subscriber numbers, or you want to speed up the processing time of the application, or you want to do X or Y, then you have to decide on what your requirements are. So requirement setting is a really important part of being a product manager. You decide what the requirements are on a very high level, first of all. So you say, we want the website to load in half the time. That's our goal. That's where we want to go. Or we want a new dashboard that shows these statistics, and we want it to load in 10 seconds maximum. And we want it to show 2 years of statistics, and we want it to load very quickly. And so those are the kind of requirements that you would spec out. You try not to get too technical at that point. You try not to limit yourself by the technicalities, because a lot of products have technical debt, and they have things that you wish you could change and you can't change. But you shouldn't let yourself be limited by that, because it'll stifle your creativity. So when you've defined a product, when you've defined the requirements that you have for the product, then you start to work with the other teams. So you start to work with the architects, first of all, and the architects will come and say that, yes, that's wonderful, but loading 2 years of data in 2 seconds is not feasibly possible without a massive amount of investment. Maybe we'd have to set up massive database servers that would cost a lot of money, and it wouldn't be worth it for the amount of gain that we're going to get. So you'll talk back and forth with the architects, and you might modify the requirements slightly and say, okay, maybe we don't need fully 2 years of data. Maybe we load 2 months of data, and we allow you to export the rest of the data. And you come up with the compromises then that you can deliver in a timely fashion. Because a product manager that is completely devoted to the requirements that they set, well, they'll never actually ship anything, because you'll just spend all of your time trying to hit these unachievable goals. And by the time you do, the market will have overtaken you, and your competitors will have signed up all your customers. So there's a real trade-off there between, perfection and getting things out the door. And so you have to always kind of think about that in terms of your requirements. So
Yeah, I think this is very important because a lot of people in the field, they don't really understand, why our product team is so slow delivering all these features that they promised. And the reality is, you have to basically break it down into different phases, right? When you start focusing on a complete product, then you will never be able to launch it
Yeah, exactly.
because of all the
So yeah.
complexities behind it. Yep.
So
Okay.
once you've got your requirements, then you identify what your like minimal viable feature set is. So maybe we want, at the end of the day, we want lots of wonderful, colorful graphs, but really the core value is this one particular piece of data that the customer wants to see, and we focus on delivering that first. And then after that, you've worked with the architects, you've worked on your requirements, you've got pretty well defined, minimal viable product that you want to release. And then what you'll do is you'll start to work with the development teams, and you'll start to further refine, along with the architects, those requirements down to user stories. And then you start to translate things down into literally what the developers will be doing day to day. While the developers are working, you'll if you're doing agile, you will have the various ceremonies like the sprint demos and things like that, and you'll go along to the sprint demos and make sure you accept the user stories, and the developers will come back and say, well, did you wanted a graph, but you never said if you wanted the graph to be green or blue or red, and you'll say you wanted it in this color, and you'll have lots of communication back and forth. And then as you get close to launching the product, you kind of turn your thoughts to sort of the marketing arm of it, which would be things like documentation. Maybe you want to record some video demos. Maybe you want to talk to some customers about the product, show it off to them, get their feedback, and maybe that comes back into the development team and you make some small changes, and that kind of thing goes on. And then eventually you get the good day when you get to mark the product in Jira. Everyone uses Jira these days as GA and generally available, and you launch it. And then you start to hear the feedback. So it's really, really important, in Cisco, and I'm sure in lots of companies, to be data-driven. So, if you release the most wonderful dashboard in the world and no one ever uses it, then did you really make a difference? And are your customers really going to be happy? And are your customers really, did you actually deliver value to the customers? So in the requirement setting phase, you'll have actually already defined what you consider the success for the product. Maybe we increase traffic to our portal by 20%. That's our goal there. And that's what you're working towards for the end of the year. And then you can measure up. Once you launch the product, that's only really the start. You start to measure the data. You start to obsessively check the data. I'm very, very data driven. And so you constantly check the dashboards to see, are people using the product, see how they're using the product. You'll have built in lots of metrics and events that are emitted whenever, if a customer is using a product, to make sure that the way that you expected them to use it is the way they're actually going to use it. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes your customers come back and say, well, I actually think it should work like this. And sometimes that's a very good idea, and you'll take that into account and you'll drive it. So, it's sort of like the agile way is to constantly kind of improve. So if you'll release your minimal viable product, you'll start to release updates, start to take into account feedback, start to look at the data that you're getting from people actually using the product, and working from there, and from there trying to constantly improve. So that's kind of the very, very high level, very high level procedure from an idea to getting something out there, and what comes after that as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think you did a pretty awesome job to summarize it in 5 minutes. But I'm sure that there is so much going on behind the scenes, and it takes a lot of effort, not only from the product manager, but also architects, engineering, marketing, and anybody who is involved in that. Okay, so I know that this is a very cross-functional team, right? You work with so many different stakeholders in terms of moving this product forward. How oftentimes you run into any friction between, other teams like sales, for example? And could you give us an example, whenever you have some friction with them, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so we don't run into friction very often, only probably 3 to 4 times per day. Look, you work with a lot of different stakeholders. You work with developers, you work with project managers, you work with sales teams and technical architects and things like that. So you work with all sorts of people, and that's one of the best things about the job, I'll be honest, is that I get to talk to loads of people every day. I'm quite a social person, and it's especially when we've been in particularly long lockdowns in Ireland, it's been great to be talking to so many different people every day while that's going on. the conflict between product managers and kind of sales teams, that's it, really it's kind of a good thing, and it shows I think a sort of a healthy dynamic. The sales teams and the account managers, they, if they're good at their job, have the best interests of their customer at heart. And they're trying to represent the customer back to the business and trying to get the customer what the customer needs to be successful. So, unless you're solving a problem for a customer, you're not really providing value. And the sales team will come with, requests from the customers and, things that the customer would like and improvements that the customer would like. The friction comes from the fact that every single, for that particular salesperson, their customer's feature is the most important thing in the world. And every single salesperson believes that every feature that they want or their customer wants is the most important thing in the world, because by rights it is. They're representing their customer, and for their customer, maybe this new feature that this customer wants is the most important thing in the world. Oftentimes we agree that feature is incredibly important, and the difficulty then comes in there is a finite number of developers in the world. If we had unlimited resources and unlimited product managers and unlimited architects and unlimited developers that we could do every feature at once, we would, but we don't, because that would you'd never make any profits if you did that. So that's where the conflict comes in. It's trying to help the sales team to understand that we're making some decisions, we're driving towards a strategy, and in order to get to where we want to be in 12 months' time, it means we have to prioritize some things over other things. And sometimes those aren't the answers that the customer wants to hear. And those are really fun calls to be on, when you're telling a customer that, we understand that this is important. We hear your use case. We hear why you want this, and we agree. We're just not going to deliver it for you right away. And that's where the friction comes in. And it's not, they're not fun calls to be on. And the sales team don't like it, because the sales teams want to come back and look like Superman and say, well, you wanted that feature? Well, here it is. I got it done, And then the sales guy looks great. The product manager wants, you want to keep the salespeople happy, because if the salespeople are happy and the customers are happy, we're making money. But sometimes the strategy dictates that we don't focus. We focus in some areas more than other areas. And as we mentioned already, if you're just taking input from the customers and doing everything they tell you to do, you're not going to execute very well on a vision to be good for all customers. So that's where the friction comes in. It's usually quite good natured. It's
a healthy friction.
Yeah. There's almost never any shouting or tears or anything. But I keep them for after the calls, after I've hung up. But that's where the friction comes about. And it's the really important thing is to have a good roadmap. And if you can rely on if you can look at your roadmap, point to it and say, look, I understand where you're coming from, but this is where we're putting our efforts, and this is why this is the highest priority right now for the company or for the product, and this is why we're putting our resources where we are. Generally, you can come to an understanding, and so that's kind of how you resolve that conflict. Not everyone walks away with what they want. Not everyone walks away happy. But that's how life is sometimes. Not everybody gets what they want all of the time, and so that's kind of how that works.
I agree. I think the key is, because I'm part of the sales team as well, I think sometimes it takes a little bit of education, to the customer, to explain, why we are doing this and why we are not doing this. And then once they understand it, they appreciate, our decision as well. So oftentimes, this is where I see the problem is. Okay, escalations. I know that, operations and tech, they always deal with escalations, as well as sales team as well. How does it affect a product manager?
Yeah, so escalations, I wouldn't say they happen too often, thankfully. If they were happening all the time, I have a lot of respect for people who deal with customer escalations all day long. It's got to be quite taxing. Yeah, they do happen. So just to give an example, we run a cloud service. Sometimes for certain parts of the feature, there are outages. We guarantee 99.999% uptime, but that's not 100%. So, some customers do sometimes they experience an outage where there is an outage of some part of the service, or maybe the whole service if it's a particularly bad one. And that's not going to make a customer happy. They are always very annoyed at that, because, we work on the product we work on is a cloud calling service, and if your phone service is down, maybe you can't make sales, or maybe you can't do something that is really important for your business. So when those things happen, I guess escalations I don't really struggle with. It's something I don't particularly mind dealing with, because if you make a mistake, you just have to put your hands up and say you made a mistake. We do root cause analysis on anything that happens, and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. But things go wrong, and sometimes things get missed, and sometimes there are bugs with products, and sometimes there are two bugs with two different products, and just because it was a blue moon on the 7th of December and it was 12 degrees, those two bugs interact in some way that causes something that you couldn't have foreseen. So when that happens, you just have to say, look, this was a miss. We will make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then the most important thing is to take that on board. Don't see it as an attack. See it as a chance to improve. So make sure that you immediately address the problem. Obviously, you can't leave people in an outage state. Once the problem is addressed, then you move on to the next phase, which is, why did this happen? And when I say why did this happen, I don't mean let's get the developer who wrote the code that had the bug in it, and let's demonstrate them in front of everybody and say they're a terrible programmer. What I mean by that is, how can we make sure that we have testing? How can we make sure that we have more redundancy so that this doesn't happen again? And you roll forward, you move forward, and you improve, and you make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Make process better.
Yeah, improve your process. It's really important when you're dealing with something like that. And this is a core skill for a product manager, is to get in the mind of the customer. Customers, sometimes it's hard to understand why a customer is something happened in the middle of the night. There wasn't even anybody on the website at that point in time. But the customer is frustrated and annoyed, and they're raising their issue with you for a reason. So it's really important to be compassionate and to take a moment to step back and say, okay, they're not trying to attack the product. They're frustrated for a reason. What is that reason? And how can we make it so that they understand what happened, or they understand why we're doing what we're doing, or they understand why it works, and how can we make their experience better? How can we take into account their feedback? And sometimes all a customer wants, they might be frustrated with the way a feature works or a product works. Sometimes all they need is they just need to vent, and they need a little bit more information. And okay, you used to do things this way, and you used to check on this portal to check this, and it looked this way. We've changed the process, and here's why we've changed the process. We think that this is going to be better going forward, and you're going to have to do things slightly differently. And here's the documentation, and here's everything you need to help you out there. And so, it's all about compassion and trying to understand it. We have vendors ourselves. We don't just, we don't build everything in-house. And sometimes things go wrong, and we're in that situation. And, you have to make sure you understand where they're coming from.
And every evolving product, it's evolved based upon these escalations, bugs, and fixes, right? So you will run into bugs, because when you build a product, it's not a perfect product on day one, right? It is evolved over time, and this is where basically the processes evolve, and I think we should all expect that something will break at some point. So get ready for that. But the key point is how we can move forward quickly from that point onwards.
And a really important thing in that, just in terms of when you're laying out your requirements as a product manager, is to make sure that you leave time so that the right testing and the right eventing and the right log collection and stuff is implemented into the product as well. Some product managers say, look, let's get the functionality done, let's throw it out there. It doesn't matter if it, let's get it out there. Work on features. You're not going to be successful if that happens, because things will start to break almost immediately, and you won't be easily able to fix them. So it's really important to build in that time and give the developers time to build in correct, alerting, monitoring, and all that kind of scalability and stuff like that, so that the product, you hopefully have less of those chances for things to happen where the product goes wrong.
Absolutely. All right, there's a lot of good things that you shared with us, Shane. So I hope that this is going to be very helpful for a lot of people who are listening to it. Last point. So as a PM, what do you suggest to the people who are still in college or universities or early in their careers? Maybe they are developers right now. What do you suggest or guide them to pursue their career in product management?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. As I said, there isn't really like a college course that would set you up. There are some courses that would set you up business development and things like that would set you up nicely for product management role. Some people think that you have to go and do an MBA to get into a product management role. I don't think that's the case. Well, obviously not. I don't have one, and I'm a product manager. I don't know of many people on my team that do. What I would say to developers, if people are in university and people are developing, the really, really important thing is it's not. I wasn't the rock star 10x developer. You don't have to be an amazing developer or an amazing architect to become a product manager. Some of the most important characteristics that you would look out for, and we're probably looking to hire some product managers soon, so I'm thinking about this a lot in terms of what we're looking for. And one of the main things you're looking for kind of empathy and compassion for the customer. So, even when I was working on developing a feature, I was trying to think of, okay, so I might be modifying a library to change the way it outputs to another library so it can be consumed by an API. And when you're down in the weeds and you're down in the trenches of writing those features, it can be hard to understand, well, what difference does this make? And it's really important as a product manager to understand how kind of those pieces fit together into impacting the customer. So yes, I'm working on this library right now, but that library is actually going to feed into a new feature, and that new feature is actually going to let the customer, add new users 10 times as more quickly than they previously were able to. So, keeping that in mind and then thinking, well, actually, maybe if we used a different library or we changed the library in a different way, maybe that would make the customer's journey a little bit easier. Maybe we could eliminate a step for the customer. So I think thinking about things while you're working on them, how is this delivering value for the customer? That's really important. I also think a really good one is look at the products that you're using every day. So we use thousands of products every day. You check your email on Gmail, you pull out your phone, you're using a phone by, an Apple-made phone or an Android device. Those are all products. And there's product managers behind that have made the decisions that mean that the things that you do happen the way that they happen. And a very common product management interview question is, how would you redesign this well-known product? Maybe Gmail. How would you add a feature to Gmail? What feature would you add? And, looking at what you're doing, looking at what products you're using and trying to understand, well, why did they make that decision? Why did they make it so that button was there instead of over here? Or why did they make this application work that way? Thinking about those kind of things and trying to think of ways that you would improve them. I think I could save the user 2 clicks if I, change this sign-up flow in some particular way. There's lots of different things that you can do to kind of prime yourself for that mindset of product management. There are some good books out there. Marty Kagan has a very good book, Inspired, and it's specifically about tech product management, and I'd recommend giving that a read. That would be a good read if you're not really sure what a product manager is and what they do and whether you think you'd be good at it. I think it's something to check out to try and get an idea of what it's like in a tech kind of a company. Another thing I would recommend as well is a big part of product management is talking to people. So get good at standing up in front of people and presenting and talking. It happens several times. Happens several times a month, I'd say, where you'll end up in a meeting and midway through the meeting, you'll be asked to present something on something that you're working on, and you'll have to do an impromptu 30-minute presentation. First couple of times that happened, you kind of freak out and you go, well, where will I get slides? What will I say? And how? And then after a while, you just, 30 minutes, no problem. I can talk for 30 minutes. So getting your kind of communication skills up and your written communication skills for helping with documentation and stuff, those are really good skills to have as well. So they're the kind of things that you should be thinking about around if you do want to become a product manager. Okay,
that is very, very useful, because I think this is also applied in sales as well. When you are moving into a sales role, maybe an SE or an account manager, these kind of things are really important, right? Your soft skill, your communication skills, how comfortable you are in front of a crowd, and you can present and talk through your narrative. So I think this is very important. Last thing, any certifications out there, generic industry certification that you can recommend for people to pursue a product management role?
I actually can't recommend any because I haven't even looked at picking any of those up for myself.
They don't exist.
Yeah, well, so not that I know of.
Yeah,
it's not something that I'm particularly worried about. I prefer to learn on the job, learn by doing. And so what I've done over the last few years is try to immerse myself and and put my hand up for as many things as I can to try and expand my skills. So, I mean, in the same way that a product manager is, there's 20 different types. So if you ask 20 different product managers, what is product management, you'll get 20 slightly different answers. I think that you can only really understand what kind of product manager you would be by looking at your skills, looking at what you'd be, what you're good at, and then how you could bring that value to a product manager role. So it's it'd be a tricky one. It'd be a tricky one to train somebody on, I think.
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry, the vertical that you're working, the product type. Is it business product? Is it consumer product? There's so many different variables, and you cannot train a product manager for a specific track, right? It depends, all of these factors. So I think you're absolutely right on that. So I think we hit all of those questions. So thank you very much for your time and a lot of information that you shared with us. I think this will be very helpful for a lot of people who are listening and watching this, and maybe they will pursue a career path to become a product manager.
Good stuff.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Enjoyed it. Cheers.
Yeah. Take care.